Also 10 hours, September 19, 1982, North Atlantic, 290 nautical miles west of Reykjavik, depth 190 meters. The Soviet Delta III class ballistic missile submarine K-436 was on silent patrol, its twin propellers slow-rolling under thermal layers, its sonar array sweeping a narrow cone through cold black silence. Captain Borodin leaned over the sonar console. Nothing but ambient hum. No ships, no cavitation, just textbook acoustic stillness. Until it wasn't. "Contact," whispered the sonar operator. Bearing Borodin asked. The response was slower than expected. "Bearing 122. Faint, harmonic." Borodin frowned. No ping, no Doppler, just a tone so faint it might have been imagined. But it tracked their movement. At 04:10, the tone shifted frequency by exactly 0.7 Hz. Then it matched again. Every turn, every depth adjustment, it mirrored them. They changed course. The harmonic followed. "Could it be surface clutter?" the executive officer asked. The sonar operator shook his head. No surface clutter at 190 meters. At 04:23, the harmonic vanished. No acceleration, no Doppler tail, just gone. Borodin ordered a periscope sweep. The sea above was empty. No wakes, no turbulence, but it wasn't over. At 04:29, a second harmonic emerged, different pitch. Same tracking behavior. This one followed for 11 minutes. By 0500, it too disappeared. There had been no torpedo arming sounds, no sonar pings, no mechanical noise of any kind, only presence, shadowing them, then vanishing. Borodin logged the event as acoustic anomaly and sealed the report. He never spoke of it again, because what followed them that night broke a rule every Soviet officer believed: if you don't hear them, they aren't there. But this wasn't a noise they missed. This was something built to never be heard at all. Inside the Naval Operations Directorate in Severomorsk, the doctrine was unshakable. Soviet submarines were apex predators of the ocean. Their boomers' massive ballistic missile platforms, like the Delta class, were built not only to survive, but to vanish. Silent running, wavelength masking, wake suppression vanes. Their motto was etched into every steel hull: if it hears, it can strike. If it cannot be heard, it will never be struck. Naval engineers dismissed foreign claims of U.S. tracking capabilities. American boats move fast. That's why they're loud. Our passive systems can detect a Los Angeles class before they reach sonar depth. Western towed arrays are fragile, useless beyond coastal zones. We don't chase. We wait. They'll make noise. They trusted their numbers. A Delta III's acoustic signature was measured at 115 decibels at 1 meter, comparable to a school of large fish in high-current waters. Soviet hydrodynamic shaping, low cavitation screws, and internal vibration dampening were supposed to give it a cloaking effect once submerged and at patrol speed. Credential drop, Number 1. In a 1978 naval symposium, Admiral Sergei Gorshkov stated, "No adversary will tail a Soviet missile submarine without being counter-detected." The fleet had tested this claim. In war games, American fast attack subs were caught before closing within 10 kilometers. Soviet subs ran drills evading even their own Oscar-class hunter killers. They built entire doctrines on this assumption. Missile patrol zones were drawn without overlapping coverage. Acoustic monitoring systems were minimal. Evacuation procedures assumed first contact was visual or sonar confirmed. They believed in quietness as immunity. What they never tested for what they never imagined was that the Americans weren't chasing Soviet submarines. They were following them. Silently. For hours. For days. And worse, undetected. The belief was absolute. The fear hadn't yet begun. Soviet submarine doctrine was forged in a crucible of paranoia and power projection. From the icy docks of Severodvinsk to the cold depths of the Barents Sea, Every element of naval design revolved around one guiding principle: survivability through stealth. The strategic missile submarine SSBN was not a hunter. It was a ghost. Its mission was singular vanish into the Atlantic or Pacific and stay hidden until launch order or recall. Survival wasn't about fighting. It was about remaining unfound. To achieve this, the Soviets built their boomers large, powerful, and deceptively quiet. The Delta class displaced 18,000 tons submerged. It carried 16 R-29R nuclear missiles with a 6,500 kilometers range. But its most critical weapon wasn't explosive. It was silence. Key pillars of the doctrine: burst speed to safety. Upon leaving port, subs would sprint to deep patrol zones before slowing to minimum noise levels. Acoustic isolation zones. Patrol zones were selected based on low oceanic activity and minimal sonar interference. Soviet planners called them blue veils regions of sound masking, created by temperature layers and seabed geography. Non-aggression protocols. Submarines were trained to evade, not engage. Fire only when targeted. Surface only on command. Hydrodynamic camouflage. External coating tiles. Screw silencers. And ballast systems were optimized to mask all signs of movement. Credential drop 2. From a 1980 Naval War College paper. Hydrodynamic silence is strategic survival. Our boomers are designed not to hunt, but to vanish. The Soviets believed that beyond 12 knots, no enemy vessel could track them without alerting their own sonar. They built entire navigation systems on this assumption. What they never considered was the opposite inversion: that an enemy didn't need to outrun them, didn't need to sonar ping them, didn't even need to emit. If a submarine could be made quieter than the sea itself, then it didn't matter how carefully the Soviets moved, because they weren't predators anymore. They were targets. 4:16 hours. Harmonic tone, faint, clean, matching course, 0419. Slight pitch shift, no Doppler, no wake turbulence, 420. Crew silence, captain leans in, recheck the filter, 422. Harmonic aligns again, not random, not natural, 423. The tone vanishes, no trail, no decay, just absence, 424. Systems reset, sonar array sweeps wide, nothing, 426. Depth adjustment initiated, 210 meters, 427. New harmonic tone, slightly lower frequency, 429. Matching course again, constant distance, constant bearing, 431. Crew at combat readiness. Captain gives order, hold torpedo lock, 432. No lock, no contact to target, 435. Periscope check. Sea above is empty, 438. Contact tone fades, 41. Total silence. No anomalies on scope, so 43. No mechanical sound, no pressure differential, 450. Logbook entry made acoustic phantom, possibly harmonic distortion, 452. Captain seals the page. The submarine was never on alert. No klaxon, no torpedoes armed, because there was nothing confirmed, just a pattern eerily intelligent, perfectly matched, and gone without a trace. Credential drop number 3. Sonar logs from K436 patrol, harmonic contact consistent with shadowing. No propulsion profile, no acceleration signature, unclassified due to lack of lock. Back in Severomorsk, analysts dismissed the tape. Operator fatigue, said one. Thermocline inversion, said another. But the sonar officer on K436 never forgot the pattern. Because harmonics don't move like that. Ships do. When K436 returned to port, the sealed report was transmitted to the Fleet Analysis Division. Its language was cautious. No direct accusations, no confirmed enemy contact, just a repeating harmonic of unknown origin that tracked vessel movement with unnatural precision. The response was swift and dismissive. Operator misinterpreted biologics, layered acoustic interference likely, seismic shelf reflections, common in that sector. No U.S. vessel could maintain passive track at patrol depth. The report was filed as an anomaly. Senior Fleet Command circulated a memo instructing crews to recalibrate sonar gain settings and avoid oversensitivity to noise reflections. One admiral was quoted saying, "We are chasing ghosts. The Atlantic is full of whispers." The idea that an American submarine could follow a Delta-class SSBN without triggering a single sonar ping violated every tenet of Soviet naval design. So the system rejected the idea. Blame was redirected to the sonar operator, likely fatigue-induced misclassification. To the engineering team, acoustic isolation systems may have created internal resonance. To the reactor crew, check harmonics from turbine oscillation. To the sea itself, abnormal layering likely. Investigate temperature gradients. Credential drop. GRU, a classified engineering bureau memo. Late 1982. No foreign vessel can maintain pursuit under full-spectrum silent regime. Event deemed physically implausible. The problem wasn't lack of data, it was lack of a conceptual framework to accept the data. To admit the possibility of silent shadowing was to admit that American submarines weren't just different. They were operating in a dimension the Soviets hadn't prepared for. So instead of escalating alert levels, they revised training manuals. Instead of opening an investigation, they closed the file. The logic was simple. If no one heard it, it wasn't there. And if it was there, better not to ask what it meant. By late October 1982, with pressure from a few senior officers who remained unsettled by the K-436 anomaly, a technical committee was quietly assembled to analyze the event. The committee's first task explained the phenomenon without implicating enemy action. The answer came from the Institute of Oceanographic Acoustics. Their theory, seismic shelf reflection. They proposed that a slow-rolling harmonic echo originating from a distant undersea quake could have refracted off a sub-oceanic plateau and been captured by K-436's sonar as a repeating pattern. The harmonic shadow could track the submarine's motion due to relative positional geometry, they claimed. The theory checked a few boxes rare enough to excuse the event's uniqueness, complex enough to intimidate dissent, non-hostile, thus politically safe. Naval Command approved the theory within a week. Quote from the oceanography team: "Anomalous echo propagation may simulate motion under specific bathymetric and thermal conditions." It was published in a classified briefing titled Echo Resonation in Arctic Shelves. The conclusion: no hostile vessel contact. Phantom echo effect confirmed. But cracks appeared quickly. The patrol sector lacked deep seismic features. Civilian ocean sensors in the region reported no tectonic activity. The harmonic frequency matched submarine cavitation bands, not geological ones. Most damning, the phantom echo had altered pitch in sync with K-436's course corrections. A rock doesn't follow a submarine. Credential drop. 4.5. A dissenting voice from the Northern Fleet Acoustic Lab. Seismic echoes don't match course bearing. This is a sonar ghost crafted, not cast. Still, the theory stuck. It provided cover. The official position became, nothing followed K-436. Nature mimicked a shadow. Stand down. But among the sonar specialists who listened to the tape, the ones who knew what cavitation sounded like, what hull resonance meant, there was no relief. Only a deeper question. What kind of enemy builds a presence that sounds like a rock, moves like a shadow, and leaves nothing behind but fear? The seismic echo theory satisfied the higher-ups, but not the fleet. Too many crew members, particularly those aboard K-436, continued whispering doubts. The pattern was too clean, the harmonic too perfect, and most importantly, it reacted. Nature doesn't react. So the Navy offered a second explanation: internal harmonic bleed-through. According to this theory, the submarine's own reactor systems, particularly the turbine stabilization gyros, were creating cyclical harmonics. These signals, distorted by hull resonance, might have been picked up by sonar as external contacts. In effect, K-436 had mistaken its own internal noise for an external stalker. It sounded plausible. Engineers pointed to known interference events from early Yankee-class subs. Sonar teams were told to recalibrate expectations. Quote from command briefing. The submarine chased its own ghost. This is an echo chamber error, not a contact. But this explanation, too, began to fracture K436, had passed all acoustic insulation tests pre-patrol. Harmonics shifted independently of reactor output. The second tone, detected 45 minutes later, did not match any onboard system frequency. The tracking matched bearing, but occurred during silent running, with turbines idling at minimum RPM. The most damning critique came from within. Credential drop. Front 6, lead sonar systems officer, classified memo. We are not hearing ourselves. We are being heard. Bureaucratic infighting followed. The reactor department blamed the sonar division. The sonar division blamed onboard AI filters. The AI team blamed oceanic layering data. Command blamed nothing. They closed the investigation. 2 false solutions now sat in the official record. Neither explained the pitch shifts. Neither explained the precise tracking. Neither explained the silence of the follower. But the truth was too disruptive to record. Because if another submarine had followed them without sonar, without wake, without signature, then the implications weren't tactical. They were doctrinal. For decades, the Soviet Navy assumed its boomers were invulnerable while submerged. This incident suggested otherwise, and so Moscow buried it. The sea remained quiet, but the silence now felt engineered. The whispers inside the Northern Fleet didn't fade. They deepened. And by early 1983, the GRU and KGB initiated a low-visibility inquiry. No media, no paper trail, just field agents dispatched to submarine yards, naval academies, and signal analysis labs. Their mission determined if a foreign vessel had, in fact, tracked K436, and if so, how, but they ran into a wall of silence not from abroad, but from within. Compartmentalization crippled the effort. Submarine logs were sealed beyond GRU clearance. Acoustic archives were controlled by Navy engineers unwilling to cooperate. Patrol sector data was siloed across 5 separate institutions. Even when they accessed it, they found gaps. Towed array recordings were corrupted. Surface sonar buoys had recorded no anomalies. SOSUS intercepts blank. It wasn't sabotage. It was a system built to reject the impossible. Every layer of Soviet detection architecture assumed that if an enemy vessel wasn't seen, heard, or triangulated, it didn't exist. The GRU analysts grew frustrated, so they widened their net. They studied American naval activity. They intercepted encrypted satellite chatter. They monitored U.S. naval exercises off Iceland and Greenland. What they found stunned them. American submarines had stopped surfacing entirely during patrol. Towed arrays on U.S. ships were increasing in length and complexity. The U.S. had begun trials with digital signal filters far beyond Soviet capacity. In internal GRU correspondence, one analyst wrote, "Credential drop. GRU-7, they do not run silent. They run invisible. They subtract themselves from the ocean." By mid-1983, the GRU came to a chilling realization. They had the data. They just didn't know how to understand it. All the raw recordings, the acoustic fingerprints, the spectral gaps, they had it. But their theories couldn't interpret what they saw. And without theory, the truth stayed hidden. The KGB closed the investigation with a single-sentence directive: no hostile contact verified, no further action required. But inside the Soviet submarine force, officers began revising their routines. Torpedoes were kept warm longer, passive sonar scans were doubled, and every harmonic that didn't belong was feared as more than noise. It might be a shadow listening. In the silence, Soviet submarines believed was safety. The U.S. Navy had found an opportunity, not just to evade detection, but to shadow their adversaries with absolute impunity. Between 1979 and 1983, American undersea warfare underwent a revolution: quiet, invisible, and total. Technology won, Anechoic coating Soviet expectation. Rubber tiles reduce passive sonar reflection. Standard on Delta-class subs. American Reality next-gen polymer tiles on Los Angeles-class boats absorbed sound and bent sonar waves. They didn't just reduce echoes, they reshaped them. Why it worked? Soviet sonar received distorted, fragmented returns. Identifying American boats became like finding a shadow in the dark. Combat example. In 1981, USS Groton shadowed a Soviet Echo 2 sub in the Mediterranean for 12 hours without being detected later, confirmed by declassified U.S. tracking data. Technology 2. Towed array sonar. CERTAS Soviet expectation. Sonar range is limited by hull-mounted constraints. American reality. Long-towed arrays extended 3,000 plus meters behind submarines, capturing deep-band, low-frequency noise Soviet boomers couldn't hide. Why it worked? U.S. boats could listen backward while staying completely silent. No ping, no risk. Combat example USS Dallas reportedly followed a Soviet Delta for over 36 hours near Greenland, without detection, later dramatized in naval warfare training as the perfect stalk. Technology 3. Propeller signature. Erasure Soviet expectation. Large props generate consistent blade rate noise, maskable but traceable. American reality? U.S. ritual? Submarines used skewed blade designs, shrouded propellers, and precision modulation to make prop signatures almost non-existent. Why it worked? Even if Soviet sonar caught a trace, it didn't match known profiles. Classification failed. Combat example 1982, North Atlantic. A Soviet Akula class failed to classify a trailing contact that was later confirmed by the U.S. as USS Pittsburgh. Technology 4. Digital signal processing. DSP Soviet expectation. Human operators interpret sonar signatures. American Reality DSP allowed American subs to isolate, clean, and analyze underwater noise in real-time, detecting even minor acoustic anomalies. Soviet systems dismissed. Why it worked? DSP filtered out noise Soviet crews assumed was natural revealing movement, mechanical changes, and depth shifts. Combat example USS Baton Rouge used DSP to detect and avoid Soviet sonar nets in the Barents Sea, completing full perimeter scans undetected. Technology 5. Silent networking Soviet expectation. Submarines are alone. All tracking is local. American reality U.S. Subs shared acoustic maps, enabling coordinated tracking of Soviet boomers across entire oceans. Why it worked? A Soviet sub tracked in the Atlantic could be handed off to another U.S. sub without breaking trail. Combat example 1983, classified operation Soviet Yankee class sub-tracked from Greenland to Cuban waters by rotating American subs, never breaking silence. Progressive scoring. Not 10% quieter, 1,000% harder to detect. Not evasion, shadowing, not passive defense, offensive invisibility. Credential drop. 8. U.S. Naval Warfare Report. 1983. We do not hunt their boomers. We follow them, and they never know. The paradigm flipped. The Soviets didn't realize their subs weren't just being watched. They were being recorded, and every time they turned left, dove, or slowed to launch depth, an American submarine was a few kilometers behind, silent, invisible, and listening. 0420 hours. K436 makes a shallow turn, 5 degrees to port. 0422, harmonic pitch shifts by 0.6 Hz. 0424, bearing realigned. Contact still unknown. 0429, periscope sweep. Sea surface clear. No mast, no wake. 0428, combat systems check. No acoustic lock. 0431, depth increased 190 to 210 meters. 0432, harmonic matches depth transition. No delay. 0435, internal comms silent. Crew on edge. 0438, contact breaks. Silence returns. 0440, captain logs echo anomaly. No target ID. 044, course resumes. Contact never confirmed. But behind that silence was a shadow. According to declassified records, USS Memphis had been tailing K436 for 42 hours. It stayed within 6 kilometers the entire time, never once detected. It used towed arrays to measure propeller harmonics, internal DSP to mask its presence, and a modulated propulsion regime that mimicked natural ocean currents. K436 had no idea. Reversal of Section 2. Mockery. They called U.S. submarines too loud to follow. They were followed for 2 days. They trusted burst speed. Americans waited in the depths. They believed in hull silence. Americans mastered the ocean's own frequency. Final kill ratio U.S. submarines confirmed 18 undetected tailings between 1981 and 1986. Soviet subs confirmed 0 American trailings in the same period. Estimated detection success rate U.S. 89%, USSR 11%. Credential drop, Doctrine Soviet Naval Review, internal circulation only. 1987, we were not leading patrols, we were being shadowed. Quietness is no longer safety. The collapse wasn't loud, it wasn't announced. It didn't involve torpedoes or sonar blasts. It was invisible. A strategic doctrine built over decades was defeated not with conflict, but with presence undetected. They weren't chasing the Americans. They were being followed. They weren't deterring war. They were being watched as proof that they could do nothing about it. A war of sound had been lost by those who believed silence meant security. By 1987, Soviet analysts began to accept the unthinkable. Their submarines, once considered sovereign weapons beneath the sea, had been quietly compromised. The doctrine of strategic invisibility had not just failed, it had never truly existed. What remained was to understand why. Failure 1. Information versus absence. Soviet doctrine valued the absence of signal as safety. But American subs weaponized that very absence, designing systems that withheld noise more effectively than Soviet systems could detect presence. Soviet quote, "We assumed silence was ours. They made it theirs." Failure. 2. Precision versus pattern. Soviet sonar sought consistent patterns, Doppler shifts, cavitation trails, regular harmonics. U.S. DSP broke patterns into microbursts, delaying acoustic trails, faking false echoes. Soviet quote, "Their noise was not low, it was restructured." Failure 3. Human versus machine. Soviet sonar relied on human interpretation. American boats used digital signal processors that could scan thousands of microfrequencies per second, isolating sounds human ears couldn't distinguish. Soviet quote, "They listened through logic. We listened through tradition." Failure. 4. Systems versus objects. The Soviet Navy thought in terms of submarines as isolated machines. The U.S. Navy thought in terms of networks sharing data between boats, sonobuoys, satellites. Soviet quote, "We saw submarines. They built oceans." This was no longer about hardware. It was about philosophy. The Americans hadn't built better submarines. They had built a better idea of what a submarine was. They didn't need to fight the Cold War beneath the ocean, because they had already rewritten it there. The final internal analysis concluded submarines must be reconceived as nodes, not vessels. Silence is no longer proof of safety. Tracking is no longer proof of superiority. The ocean is no longer neutral, and though they never admitted it in public, the Soviet submarine force quietly changed protocols. They no longer assumed they were alone, because silence, they realized, could no longer be trusted. 210 meters below the Atlantic, the sonar screen glowed dimly. No pings, no contacts, just soft hums of the deep, then a harmonic, clean, cold, unnatural. The sonar officer stared. It matched the sub's motion perfectly, then vanished. No confirmation, no response, just the empty screen once more. A moment later, the crew logged the reading as false echo. But the captain didn't believe it, because ghosts don't track depth shifts. Echoes don't hold formation. He knew something had been there, but the ocean had no memory, no wreckage, no trace, No story, just silence. It was not just a shadow on sonar. It was proof that the Cold War was not won with depth charges or torpedoes, not even with nuclear warheads. It was won with algorithms, with polymers and pressure harmonics, with silence engineered so precisely, it became strategy. The Soviet Navy didn't lose in battle. It lost in the gap between what it could hear and what the enemy had stopped making sound for. Cold War wasn't won with nukes. It was won with harmonics, processors, and arithmetic Moscow couldn't match.